Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Patty and I go by Patty Magnets Online. This video is made in response to some viewer questions I've been getting, and I think there's a little bit of confusion concerning how do we set up to knit in the round and what exactly is happening, like the mechanics of the knitting in the round. So I'm going to try to answer some of those questions today. I hope this is clear. I'm like really doing this off the cuff, so I hope it's going to make sense. I just filmed another video on how to read your package on your circular needles and what the information is telling you and some things to think about when you're selecting those needles. I have another video that's already made that I did last spring on matching your yarn and needles, and I will link to that also. But today, let's just kind of look at the mechanics between flat knitting and circular knitting and how they're similar and how they're different. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my circular needles and I'm just going to put them to the side. And we're just going to look at our flat knitting first. And we're going to talk a little bit about the needles. I'm just going to cast on a very few stitches. I'm going to use the long tail method. And we're just going to put like maybe 10 stitches on this needle. And so when I do long tail, because I am right-handed, I just grasp that needle and I put my stitches on. And I will link over to the tutorial I have on long tail cast on if you need that. But this video basically assumes that you understand how to do that. We're just kind of running through it. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of how to do that cast on. We're just running through it and putting stitches on the needle just so I have stitches on there to show you. Okay, so let's see. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16. All right, so we'll just do those 18, that's fine. So we have the stitches on the needle, and then we're going to turn it so that our yarn, working yarn, is on the right side. And this is our tail. We're just going to get that out of the way. It's way too long. So we're going to hold this needle in our left hand, and then we're going to take the working needle, which is this one, in our right hand. And our yarn is over here, and all I'm going to do is just knit. And so the mechanics of the flat knitting are that your working yarn is to the right side, it's in your right hand, and you're basically transferring all the stitches from the left needle to the right needle. That's all we're doing, is we're just knitting across. Okay, so now we're at the end. So now we take our last stitch, and what's happened? Well, this needle is empty. This needle is empty, and now all of our stitches are on this side. And then what are we going to do? We're going to now put this fabric into our left hand, and now we have an empty right needle, and then we're going to start the process again. So basically you're constantly transferring your stitches from your left needle to your right needle, and then you're turning your work around the other way so that your working yarn is always on your right side. If your working yarn is over here, you know that something isn't quite right. So always make sure that your working yarn is to the right. Okay, now let's look at the circular needle. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just cast on a bunch of stitches. I'm going to use the same long tail cast on method, and I'll just run through that because I don't think that you need to see that again. So I'll just put that on, and then I'll come back and then we'll pick up. Okay, so I've got some stitches on my needle, and here's what I want to talk about with you first. So the procedure is really the same. This is attached, but don't worry about this needle for right now. We're just going to cast our stitches on, and it's just like we did with the straight needles. We have the working needle in our right hand, and we're just going to cast on our stitches, just exactly like we did in the last setup. Okay, so let's just, we'll stop with that. So then what we would want to do, so what happens is when you're working on a knitting pattern, it's going to tell you to cast on your number of stitches and then join in the round. And then the other thing is don't twist your stitches. So you want to make sure that everything is going this way. So like a twisted stitch would look like that. See how that kind of loops around? You don't want that. That's going to mess you up. Make sure everything's going the same way, and you can see there's your purls and there's your knit side, and everything's just as it should be. So okay, so then we want to join in the round, and what you've got to do is get both of these up to. And I will tell you right now that there's really not quite enough stitches on this cast on for this to work out properly. You're going to have elongated stitches, and you're going to stretch some stuff out. So if you are having a lot of trouble getting your stuff around to where you can actually join, you may want to consider either using the DPNs or magic loop, because it's not quite enough in the way of stitches on this needle to reach all the way around. So that's one troubleshooting thing to look at. Do you have enough stitches on your cast on to be able to use the cable that you're working with? So let's cast on some more stitches, and then I think you'll see it's a lot easier to join. Okay, I think that's all we can really add to this. Okay, but that gave me quite a few more stitches. So now I can much more easily distribute those stitches across. So that is going to make it much easier for me to join in the round, and it means it's a more appropriate number of stitches on that cast on to be using this needle. So now we're going to join and start knitting in the round, and it's very easy to get confused with this. I had a viewer who is getting really confused with the process, and it can be confusing until you get your project going and started. It can be very confusing. That's completely normal. Okay, so when you're looking at your project, here's what I want you to notice. Your working yarn is still to your right, And this is going to be your right needle, which is your working needle. And this is still going to be just like your left hand needle. So when you're looking at this side is still this, and this side is this. The difference is that it's all connected on this cable, but the function of this needle is the same as this one. This is the working needle. And what we're going to be doing is transferring these stitches around. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Let's do something. There are different ways to join in the round. The way that I have always done it when I use this circular method like this is to cast on one extra stitch, and then I will slip the first stitch or the last stitch on with the first stitch and come in to do a knit two together and pull through just like you're knitting, because you are. And there it is, you're joined. And now you're just going to keep knitting. In this particular sample, we're just going to knit all the way around. And don't worry about that. So see, this is my right needle, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I am inserting into the stitch on the left, and I'm transferring that stitch to the right. Just exactly the same thing. It just is a little bit weird because it's all connected now. Okay, but this is exactly the same thing. So there's our right hand needle. It's going into the stitch on our left hand needle. We knit, we transfer it over. And as in all knitting projects, that first row or round is going to be the most challenging to get through. So just, keep your cool. You're going to want to scoot your stitches around here a little bit. But just keep in mind, it's exactly the same thing. This is the working needle in your right hand, just like always. This is the side that's just basically holding the stitches. It's holding your live stitches or holding your work. And we're just going around. It's exactly the same thing. It's just that instead of in the straight knitting where we would be transferring all the stitches over and then it would get full, this would be empty and this would be full, and then we would turn. What's happening is that it's just moving its way around the cable. So these are all the new stitches we've made, and then here is the cast on stitches, and where that tail falls, that tells you it's the start of a new round. So let's come all the way around. And I will be honest with you, a lot of times these things, and especially in knitting, you just kind of have to jump in there and do it a few times. Don't be afraid. Just jump in and cast on the yarn and just give yourself permission to just, take an evening, watch a couple shows, listen to a podcast, whatever it is you like, and just practice this. I mean, you're not wasting time because you're learning. Anytime you're working on your skill set, it's a learning process. It doesn't always have to be a project, but I also am a process knitter. I just enjoy the process of the stitches so much. I don't even care if I make a project. I just like knitting. So anyway, okay, now here we go. So see, it's starting to look a little weird. This is where we're coming back to our beginning. It's joined, it's kind of loose. I also didn't leave myself a whole lot of space with that tail, but that's okay. So now we're there. You could put, let's see, do I have one out here? Yes, I do. Okay, so this is a stitch marker. You could use a piece of yarn if you want, whatever. You put that on and that tells you, okay, I have completed a whole round. And basically what we've done, this is the same thing as holding this all in this right hand. We've gone all the way. And so now we're starting again. And there's all our pretty stitches. So if you always lay down your work so that the needles are pointing away from you and you have your working yarn to the right, you'll always know that this is your right needle and this is your left needle. And when you pick your work up again, you'll know that you start going around this way, because you can get really confused and pick up and knit the wrong way. Ask me how I know. It's happened more than once. But as long as I make sure that my work is laying down, my needles are pointing away, and the working yarn is on the right, I always know this is my right hand needle. And so I'm just going to go all the way around. We're going to do a few more stitches and I'll show you something else. And I'm knitting every stitch, and what's really interesting is that when you are knitting in the round and you knit every stitch, you wind up with stockinette. Whereas if you are on flat knitting and you knit every stitch, you will wind up with garter. And it's because when you knit in the round, you're always on the right side of your work. The project right side, the fabric right side. The right side is always facing you. Okay, that's enough. And you can kind of see what's going on. See, I've got all these really beautiful knit stitches. Isn't that lovely? And then we turn it over and look at this. It's all purl. Isn't that amazing? So all of your pearls are inside of the work. And as I knit along on this project, you will really start to see it grow, and it will make more sense in terms of right side and wrong side. But we know that here is the beginning of our round because there's my stitch marker. So if you have to lay your work down or come back to it, you always know where the beginning is. And that is like super important. And then when you do that, slipping those first two stitches together, if you pull down on that tail and you weave it in a certain way, we'll have to do a video on that, you can have a beautiful seamless join right there. So see, this can happen. See how that is? But my yarn is over here. So like if I got confused, I would know that, wait a minute, working yarn goes over here. And then I know, okay, I'm back on my project right side. And we just keep knitting. And I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have other questions on this. I know it can be really confusing to get started on this type of thing, this knitting in the round. Once you've done it a few times, it will make sense to you. So what I encourage you to do is to just knit a big tube. Just, do that. Knit for a while, lay your work down, go do something else, come back, pick it up, and then really look at what you're doing and see if it makes sense to you. And I think that's all I have for you in this video. I hope this helps. If you have other questions about it, just leave a note below and I will do my very best to answer your question. And I think that's all I have for you. And oh, Oh, I thank you for bearing with me. It's kind of an off-the-cuff sort of video tutorial, sort of a stream of consciousness thing, and I hope that that works for you and makes sense. I really do want to try to help you to understand how to do this. So, okay, I'm going to stop with that. And you can see, here's my stitch marker, and there's my little tail, so I know here's the end of my round. Okay, that's it. I'm going to sign off for now and say thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you.